I know I'm more than a week behind with posting this video, but I really wanted to see as many movies as possible before making this list. So I spent the last couple of weeks watching a whole lot of different films. Thankfully, I managed to watch every movie that I really wanted to see, with the exception of Memoria. But I don't know if I'll even get the chance to ever see that film, so I'm content with the list that I ended up with. But before I talk about my top 10 favorite films of the year, I'd like to highlight some honorable mentions. Belfast, Black Widow, Bo Burnham Inside, The Harder They Fall, Last Night in Soho, Mass, Nobody, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Swan Song, and Zack Snyder's Justice League. I know, that last one really surprised me too. But all of these movies are great, and any one of them could have made my top 10 list. So that's a damn good honorable mentions list, I would say. But without any further ado, let's get into my favorite movies of 2021, starting alphabetically with Koda. The overall story of Koda may seem a bit familiar. You have a high schooler who's coming of age and deciding what they want to do with their young adult life, but this film stays fresh and relevant by focusing on a character who has deaf parents. So, Ruby has a unique perspective that separates her from other typical coming-of-age characters. She faces a lot of distinctive challenges that most people wouldn't even think about. And yet, Koda makes a point to establish that Ruby's deaf parents are not helpless individuals. They run a business, they make jokes, they have lots of sex, they have fully realized lives. The fact that the movie features actual deaf performers just adds an extra layer of authenticity to an already beautiful coming-of-age tale. So Koda is a truly eye-opening and heartwarming film. Dune, Part 1. Dune is, without a doubt, my favorite movie of the year. I love everything about it, literally. I don't think there is a single aspect of this film that I actually do not like. The direction, the cinematography, the visual effects, the story, the performances, the soundtrack, the editing, the pacing of the narrative, everything added up to create a true cinematic experience unlike anything I've ever seen before. And I get that the material, or the genre in general, may not be everyone's cup of tea, but I absolutely adored this film from start to finish. Denis Villeneuve managed to take Frank Herbert's original source material, which is pretty dense, and create a movie that is surprisingly easy to follow along with, all without sacrificing the rich mythology of the novels. The fact that Villeneuve can make an engaging story that is both intimate and epic in scope at the same time is just mind-blowing. He can make a big budgeted action movie feel like a small little indie drama, and vice versa, which is why Villeneuve is my favorite director working today. Maybe even my favorite director of all time, because the man is a genius. Movies like Dune are exactly why I love the movie-going experience. Getting to see this film on a huge IMAX screen was an otherworldly experience. So I can't wait to see what happens in Dune Part 2. Encanto. At the beginning of last year, I thought Encanto was going to be a simple, cheesy little Disney movie that paled in comparison to an awesome adventure feature like Raya and the Last Dragon. Well, I was wrong. This wonderful little movie totally caught me by surprise. For an animated feature that is aimed at children, this film is filled with surprisingly mature themes, a culturally rich story unlike anything Disney has ever told before, and some bold narrative choices. For example, there isn't even a main villain or a love interest for the main character in this movie. because this film is just about the challenges that come with being part of a family. Even though you may have your own idea of how you want your life to be, you may have a specific role in your family dynamic. And because of that, certain expectations may be placed onto you. So sometimes, to vent out your frustrations, you just need a family member to hear you out. And that's a fantastically small concept that I'm sure plenty of people can relate to. So the relatable story, along with the beautiful animation, the lighthearted and uplifting tone, and the catchy music, all made Encanto a really damn good film. Easily one of my favorite Disney animations ever. In the Heights, another movie featuring great music by Lin-Manuel Miranda, In the Heights is a joyous celebration of community and heritage. While a lot of people are including West Side Story in their top 10 lists, I personally prefer this modern movie musical. Because despite the fact that the movie features a sleek modern aesthetic and some socially relevant themes, West Side Story as a whole just feels a little dated to me. In the Heights, however, feels like a musical for a modern generation. And it also features some socially relevant subject matter. But everything about this film just felt lively, energetic, and fun. Josie, the tiger, and the fish. There's usually one anime feature that ends up on my year-end favorites list, and while I thought 2021's anime film was going to be Demon Slayer because of how popular the series really is, despite my best efforts, I just couldn't get into that anime. It's not my cup of tea. So I'm more excited to talk about this little movie, which seemingly came out of nowhere, but left me pleasantly surprised. Josie, the Tiger, and the Fish is a charming and heartfelt animated feature that isn't afraid to be melodramatic. Following a 22-year-old diver who dreams of studying abroad, Suneo gets a job assisting Josie, an artist whose imagination takes her far beyond the bounds of her wheelchair. So, this is a love story between two young adults who are trying to find themselves. And while there is a subplot involving a love triangle that doesn't really work, the gorgeous animation, the delightfully earnest story, and the mature thematic elements more than make up for the unnecessary plotline. So, if you're a fan of anime, or animated films in general, I would highly recommend this movie. King Richard. King Richard is a very different kind of sports biopic, in the sense that it doesn't even really focus on the star athletes, Venus and Serena Williams. It instead focuses on their father, Richard, who was clearly a controversial and infuriating individual. And while that narrative choice may make Venus and Serena seem incidental to their own rise to greatness, it also makes for an entertaining and inspirational story about parental perseverance. Throughout the film, Richard Williams is trying to do right by his daughters, despite facing racism and classism, but also in spite of his own flaws. And this depiction of Richard made the movie feel realistically grounded and refreshingly nuanced. The fact that Will Smith delivers one of his best performances to date as Richard Williams is just an added bonus. So King Richard is a delightfully crowd-pleasing experience that is moving, inspiring, and quite cathartic. A Quiet Place Part 2. The Quiet Place movies are masterclasses in how to create tension in a film, because I don't think I've ever been more on the edge of my seat than I was while watching Quiet Place Part 2. John Krasinski made a fantastic continuation to his original film, as I think this movie is probably one of the best horror sequels of all time. A Quiet Place Part 2 is terrifying, nerve-wracking, and immensely suspenseful. It expands upon the lore of this world in clever and unique ways. It never loses track of its heart because the story stays focused on its characters, and above all else, it's just entertaining as hell. I love this franchise, and I'm really looking forward to Part 3. I just hope any potential follow-ups can retain the same level of quality as the first two parts. Spencer. I did not expect to love this movie as much as I did. I don't know anything about Princess Diana or the royal family. I'm not a huge fan of Kristen Stewart, and I never saw Pablo Larraín's previous film, Jackie. And yet, I absolutely loved Spencer. I don't care if the film is historically inaccurate or if it gives a fictional portrayal of Princess Diana and the royal family. I love that this movie is just about a woman who is trying to escape from having every single minute detail of her life being controlled by somebody else. It's a relatable concept that makes for an intimate and personal story with a simple message about staying true to who you are, no matter where you come from, even if that means breaking free of family or royal traditions. Plus, Spencer features the best performance of Kristen Stewart's entire career, so now I definitely have to go back to watch Pablo Larraín's Jackie because I loved Spencer that much. Spider-Man: No Way Home. Man, this film is truly something special. I don't know how anyone could be a Spider-Man fan and not like this movie, because No Way Home was made for Spidey fans. The film is far from perfect. I have some nitpicky issues regarding the pacing, the editing, and some of the visual effects work, but none of that takes away from the fact that I absolutely loved this movie. No Way Home is a celebration of Spider-Man's legacy in film history, honoring 3 generations of Spider-Man films, all while keeping its own story tightly focused on Tom Holland's Peter Parker. And Tom Holland is the absolute heart and soul of this movie, delivering one of his best performances to date. Anyone who hasn't been happy with Holland's interpretation of Spider-Man, especially those who have been calling him Iron Man Jr., should be happy with his depiction of the iconic web-slinger here. Because No Way Home is clearly a love letter to Spider-Man and to Peter Parker. This character within the MCU has been through some shit. And by the end of the film, he actually becomes the version of Spider-Man that we all know and love. And I think that's really beautiful. So Spider-Man: No Way Home is a fun, emotionally resonating, and surprising film that acts as both a satisfying conclusion to the Homecoming trilogy and a new beginning for Peter Parker in the MCU. And finally, The Suicide Squad. Yes, even though I loved Shang-Chi, and even Black Widow for that matter, I think The Suicide Squad was just a tad bit better than both of those comic book films. This movie is just crazy and chaotic in the best way possible, as if James Gunn was given free rein to do whatever the hell he wanted. And the result is a wildly entertaining and gloriously violent feature that also has a surprising amount of heart. Though I personally like his work on Guardians of the Galaxy better, it's obvious that Gunn knows how to make a soulful story about a ragtag group of misfit characters. I actually cared for the main heroes in this movie, and that's a lot more than I can say about some of the other characters in the DCEU. So, combined with Gunn's clever writing, his dark sense of humor, and his over-the-top violence, I easily found The Suicide Squad to be one of the most creative comic book movies yet. This is a funny, fast-paced, and action-packed film that really highlighted James Gunn's strengths as a director, and I love his style. so I can't wait to see what he brings to Guardians 3. And that's it. Those are my 10 favorite movies of 2021. But even though we're already in 2022, I still have a few more 2021 videos to work on. I still want to make a full review on Spdier-Man, for example, so I can give all of my thoughts on it. So you'll still see a couple of more 2021 film reviews throughout January, and maybe even February, depending on how I feel. So I guess it's a good thing that not a lot of new movies are being released at the moment. But anyway, Happy New Year, and as always, thanks for watching.